Welcome to the Rest is Politics question time with me, Rory Stewart.
And me, Alastair Campbell.
And it's rather nice. It's another unusual in-person thing. I can report from the front line that Alastair is wearing a rather kind of fetching sort of down waistcoat.
Not a waistcoat. It's a body warmer.
What do you call it, a gilet?
No, it's a body warmer, isn't it? I think it's a body warmer. Yeah, if it's in French, it'd be a gilet, but it's a body warmer. It's a padded body warmer. You've got to remember, Rory, that was in very, very, very cold water not long ago.
You literally went in with the snow, didn't you?
3 degrees, yeah. It was fantastic. I came out with...
Is there a temperature where it actually gets dangerous to do that, where your heart stops?
When I jump in when it's really, really cold, because I'm used to it, I do sometimes think about if I wasn't used to this, you would panic because the shock, you feel like you're being stabbed. I know it sounds crazy that you'd want to do it, and it's like when that feeling stops, it's quite nice, but that's when it's quite dangerous. So I only stayed in for 6.5 minutes this morning.
Right.
But yeah, no,
but it definitely wakes you up.
Oh, you feel great afterwards. Yeah, yeah, but cold.
Is there a hot shower when you get out?
Yeah.
Very good. Okay.
Should you ever read his question?
Yeah, go on then. Alastair Gaylor, Germany. What do you guys think would have happened if the German coup had been successful? And what does it tell us about how strong advanced democratic countries actually are? So this was a German coup. Tell us a bit about the German coup.
Well, a German attempted coup. On the one hand, I look at these people with their ridiculous names, Prince Heinrich XIII from Rice, and somebody double barrel the third, and all these, and then some ex-commando guy, and I think this is just absurd. But then you think, well, in 11 of the 16 Länder, more than 3,000 police officers involved in simultaneous raids. There must have been something really quite serious.
Well, there's something very weird, isn't it? They claim they raided over 150 properties, but they've only arrested 20 people. There seems to be a bit of discrepancy.
Well, so far they've arrested 23 people. I think they were searching for weapons, which they found.
Right.
They were obviously searching for documentation, which they found as well. But it's not that long ago. I think the thing that worried me was that, was it Ursula von der Leyen who was still Defence Secretary, when there was a part of the Special Forces that were shown to have very, very strong hard right links. And one branch of it has been shut down because they felt the whole thing had been infiltrated by the far right.
Yeah, it's a bit weird, isn't it? And this is also, the centre of this seems to have been Thuringia, part of it. Thuringen, which was part of East Germany. And this very, very peculiar man, his family, he's actually he's more of a big deal in Germany than maybe people are reporting. Because on the one hand, his territory was tiny. His ancestors ruled a state, which was about 300 square miles, which is considerably smaller than Cumbria or Cornwall. But when I was going to Germany in the, early 90s, lots of people talked about him. They're a very famous family because of this stupid Henry thing, which is that the Holy Roman Emperor in the 12th century, Henry, gave them their land. And ever since then, every single one of them has to be called Henry. And more recently, Prince Henry. And they number from the beginning of the century and then start again.
So he's genuinely the 13th in that line?
He's not in the line. So he's in the 13th Henry this century from that family. But his father wasn't called the 13th. His father was called something like the 4th or the 5th. Another one of the Prince Henrys of Royce is married to an ABBA singer. Or was married to an ABBA singer.
What?
Yeah, that's why she's a princess. Yeah. So I thought this was important for you. So I don't know much about ABBA, but I've been trying to get into this.
Well, I know a lot about ABBA.
Anna Fried was married to his cousin, who was another Prince Heinrich.
To Heinrich's cousin?
Yeah.
The one with the check coat, the Tory hunting coat.
Another Prince Heinrich, yeah. They're all called Prince Heinrich because they all have to be called Heinrich, regardless of which number they are. Every child has to be called Heinrich.
This is feeling a bit cultist.
It's kind of weird, yeah.
Okay.
Anyway.
Well, what about the other name that stood out to me was Rüdiger von Pescatori, which sounds like a sort of exotic dish that you would have somewhere.
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? It's quite difficult to take it seriously with all this stuff going on.
It is, but that's what I say, that they're very into this whole sort of, they're anti-vaxxers. They keep getting parking fines and speeding offences because they refuse to acknowledge things like German federal driving licenses.
They believe the German state, if I'm right, is a corporation. They refuse to call it a nation.
It was set up by the Allies after the Second World War to basically become a kind of a big retail centre for Americans.
That's right. It's like a sort of massive McDonald's.
Yeah, exactly.
So they kept.
So they don't recognise it.
So the centre of their revolution was a little town of 7,000 people, about the size of Crieff, where I come from in Scotland, where they were trying to convince everybody to sign up for the nation of Reuss, which is this little princely state. And apparently it was really weird because it's a tiny 7,000 people. So the local grocer would be like, did you get that note through your door saying you've got to sign up to be
if they're just a bunch of cranks, though, you would not have 3,500 police officers put on duty to go and get these guys, would you? Because I think the far right in Germany is, we see them occasionally in sort of football hooliganism, but, last year there were 55,000 politically motivated crimes in Germany. And 40 odd % of those were seen as crimes of the hard right.
Right.
So that's quite a lot. 38% neither right nor left. I don't really know what that means.
Yeah.
And this link into parts of the military and parts of the
38% of them were aggressive centrists.
Well, I'm a bit of an aggressive centrist myself, Rory, as you know.
I think we need a bit more. You might find yourself in trouble. Yeah.
Right, here we are. Subod Kafle, please can you cover the madness that's going on in Peru? In the first round, Castillo got 18% of the vote, while Fujimori got 13% of the vote. How mad that Peruvians ended up having to pick between the two. And of course, now we've had Castillo, the winner, gone. I think he's now in a jail.
Yeah, he tried to do his own self-coup d'etat.
He did.
An amazing thing. So he was the president, and he suddenly decided he was going to try to dissolve, effectively, the sort of parliament. And it all went wrong. I mean, so there was a total standoff. Castillo is an extreme left-wing populist, pretty poor background, very, very simple rural teacher, came up in the trade union movement, was elected in power, but at this very narrow margin, as our question pointed out, found himself with a right-wing parliament he was dealing with. Finally, after they tried to impeach him 2 or 3 times, he tried to shut them down. So complete constitutional coup, like Trumpian beyond imagining. And he's now been toppled, as you say, thrown in jail.
Well, his cabinet didn't back him, the police didn't back him, the military didn't back him. It was not a very good coup.
No. He's a rather sort of unfortunate figure. I mean, when you look at him, he does always look a bit hopeless.
Yeah. Well, he's now in this jail that was built for his predecessor, who's also... See, they're now just the two of them in this... These two former presidents in a jail together. And meanwhile, Dina Boluarte is his successor.
And is this
there's trouble on the streets already.
Is this the jail where Fujimori was also held?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, I mean, it is also very interesting how much Latin American politics has changed quite quickly, because obviously Fujimori was very much part of the right. And when you were dealing with these governments, Latin America, through the late 90s, they were dominated by these very kind of big finance ministers who are very kind of orthodox, Washington consensus, balance the budgets, export, foreign investment, hanging out with Gordon Brown at Davos. And now so many of these countries have gone to a form of populist left.
Absolutely, yeah. But I'll tell you, I listened, my good friend Moises Naim, the 3 Ps man.
Absolutely, yeah.
I listened to, he was on a podcast the other day about Latin America.
And where's he from again?
He's from Venezuela.
Venezuela, right.
And he said, yes, there's lots of really bad stuff going on in Venezuela, but he said that in Guyana, Dominican Republic, and Panama, things are a lot better. And the guy who was interviewing him said, yeah, but and the other ones he mentioned were Costa Rica and Uruguay. There are success stories in Latin America, they said.
Meanwhile, Chile, Mexico,
okay, right, Rory, you'll go.
Brazil. Yeah, okay. Here's a question for you. Hugh Ramsden. I worry too much emphasis is put on what happens on Twitter. I personally take no issue with a politician who has no active presence on Twitter, and I don't believe their activity on such a platform makes any meaningful difference for their constituents or real life. And this was David Cameron's view back in the day. It's like people who go on Twitter are twats.
Yeah. I think there's something in it. I think, look, funny if I did, after I saw Marina Litvinenko yesterday, I was interviewed by Brian Moore, the former rugby player, because as part of his degree course, he's doing a big thing on social media. And we were talking about, the question was, why do I use Twitter? Okay. And I've actually, because of the Elon Musk thing, I've been sort of thinking, would my life really change that much if I wasn't on Twitter? Because I do find Musk pretty repellent, I must be honest. I don't
Well, his stuff about prosecute Fauci was extraordinary.
And there's the whole sort of attention-seeking nature of himself, and he talks absolute crap a lot of the time. So I was thinking about, and I've definitely been engaging a lot less on Twitter. I've not been looking at Twitter as much. I tweet, so I'll probably promote tonight the Albert Hall thing. I'll probably do
your tree of the day.
I always will do my tree of the day, but I could easily migrate that to somewhere else.
Tree of the Day can move to somewhere else.
Yeah. So
that would be a pity with Tree of the Day. Miss Tree of the Day.
So I think that question has got a point.
Twitter's a weird thing, isn't it? So David Baddiel has been off Twitter for a month. Great comedian. And he was saying how wonderful it was.
It's not coming home, though, is it?
Got covered, not coming home. Football's not coming home. Got a couple of hours back in his life. But then he said, actually, there's also something that he really enjoys about it. And I do love it. I really love it.
You spend way too much time.
I've been having some very happy conversations about Neolithic archaeology recently, and I don't know where else I'd have those conversations. Certainly not with you. You don't want to talk to me about Neolithic archaeology.
I'd love to. Well, listen, here's one on Twitter, Rory. Does it show, says Erica Neustadt, does it show concern for the ever-deepening climate emergency to fly yourself and your family to Doha to watch football?
It's a good challenge. It's a very, very good challenge. I don't know what to say about that. I mean, I think I live next to Doha. You don't care? I don't care. I care. Live next to Doha. And I guess, it's not like flying from Britain. So I'm flying from Amman to Doha. And I thought it would be a nice thing for little boys to see some football.
That's fair. Okay. So, Rory, Olivia Bright, remembering your... By the way, did you see that I did Tree of the Day from Cumbria?
Yeah, it's very good.
From your constituency.
I spotted the spot. I think
good. If you still represented a Cumbrian constituency, where would you stand on the new Cumbrian coal mine? And now that you don't, does your position differ?
I think it probably does differ. So to put the history of it, there were a small number of people in my constituency who were very, very strongly against the coal mine, but the majority of people were very much in favour. And it was cross-party.
Because of jobs?
Jobs. Labour and Conservative. It's a relatively deprived area of West Cumbria, really struggling for economic activity, and has been for a long time. And the coal mine was going to create 500, I think, direct jobs, 1,500 indirect jobs. And so I would have been very unpopular with all my local councillors, and actually pretty unpopular with a lot of Labour voters and most of the working class voters in my constituency if I'd come out heavily against the country.
So had you been an MP, you'd have been in favour, but now you're not, you're against?
I do, yeah. I'm afraid it is impossible to square with our climate obligations. It just doesn't make any sense. That coal mine is supposed to be running till nearly 2050, and we're supposed to be weaning off coal by the mid-2030s. And we're meant to be getting steel off coal, which is what this coal's used for. So it's a classic example of something. And it's also, I think it must be uncomfortable for Labour too, because remember, Labour was very, very associated with fighting to keep coal mines open.
Absolutely.
Which may be why there's a lot of Labour support for reopening that coal mine in Cumbria.
Let's have a little break and then we'll come back.
Welcome back to the Restless Politics Question Time with me, Rory Stewart.
And me, Alastair Campbell.
Question for you. Vicky Pales, listening to the anthems of other nations at the World Cup, has again highlighted how uninspiring, brackets musically, and out of date lyrically, brackets reign over us, God Save the King is. Would you replace it, and what would you agree? It's a bit of a droning song.
Oh, it's awful. It's awful. It's awful. One of my favourite Billy Connolly sketches was when he suggested replacing it with the theme tune from The Archers.
And what is it particularly awful? You just think it's a very boring, droning
dirgy.
Tune.
I think
it's a bit weird, isn't it? Because the Germans have like one of the greatest pieces of music ever. The French have an extraordinary.
The Italians, the Russians.
The Russians are amazing.
Anthem,
yeah.
The American anthem's good.
Yeah.
And when you saw, sorry to go on about the football, but when you saw, I mean, fair play, the England players were all booming it out, but they were struggling a bit. You saw the French, when they get to marchons, marchons, I mean, it's proper. You're on the march. And I do think, I hate to say this, and if Marina Litvinenko was here now, she'd really give me one of those looks she gave me when we were talking about Tony Blair and Vladimir Putin. I mean, the Russian anthem is a bit special. So I think it would be, look, the Queen, R.I.P., God bless her, Charles, they're trying to get we got Harry and Meghan doing the Netflix stuff. Why don't the royal family sort of lead the charge for a new national anthem and turn it into a fantastic reality TV show?
Potentially, they could keep some of the same. There is no problem with saying God Save the King, but you could have a better tune, couldn't you?
Yeah, but also I think the ones that have, you could definitely have a better tune. I mean, my God, you just want to I want to go to sleep when I hear it.
And there's all this good, we take a bit of Handel, take a bit of Bach.
Oh, no, I think we're going to have a British composer, Rory. And for God's sake, we don't want the British left. For God's sake. I honestly think a modern national anthem, get a citizens assembly with Paul McCartney, Adele, Ed Sheeran, the LSO.
And you really think this should be local? You're not going to get in ABBA to do it. You've really decided this is going to be British led.
Yeah, I think so. Unless ABBA naturalised, which I don't think they will. They're very, very Swedish. No, I had. What about that? Let's just do this one, right? Hillary Newton. Have Alastair and Rory watched the Harry and Meghan programmes? I'm a no.
I'm a yes.
Oh, wow. If so, does anything in it justify the bile and hatred being thrown at them by the British press? Why do the palace press officers continue to support papers who so debase British society and social cohesion? So you've watched it?
Yeah, I watched the first episode. I mean, it's a very difficult thing for me. On the one hand, I think that it's tricky. I mean, I feel for Prince Harry. I think that, and he comes across in it as very broken and understandably very shaken up by his mother's death, by his relationship with the media. I mean, basically the program is about his hatred of how intrusive the media was in every element of his life. And one of the subtexts of it seems to be a sense that the royal family has felt for a long time that to maintain their position in British society, they almost need to be in the press all the time. Do you think that's, I mean, as somebody who really understands press, is that true? Is it actually true that to maintain their relevance and popularity, it is useful for them to be covered almost every day, not just once a year?
Not necessarily every day, but I think well, first of all, I think you're 100% right. And I've talked to him and to William about this. I think William hides it very well. I think they despise much of the British media and much of the world's media. And I think it is a lot of it about their mother. I think they do feel, and that's why the Queen's death was planned to the extent that it was, and the funeral and all that followed. I think they do feel that without that permanent sense of relevance and connection with the British people, that they feel very, very vulnerable.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Do you feel this, and this is a question I've always wanted to ask, do you feel that it's true for you too, that it's important for you personally as an individual, for your brand, as it were, to be in the media regularly, sort of in every week or so? What would happen if you vanished for 6 months? Would it affect how well known you were or not? Or
yeah, probably. But I don't. I mean, like, I'm thinking about a bit like you. I say no to way, way, way more things than I say yes to. But I think, like, look, to be honest, this podcast has given both of us a whole new kind of sense of a different sort of profile. I think now I see my profile developing through stuff, longer form stuff like books, films. I don't feel the need to be in the papers at all. I don't care if I'm in the papers. I really have got no interest to be in the papers at all.
It's interesting. I've got colleagues like, I mentioned some of them. Mark Francois, for example, was often in the newspapers, British MP, Brexit voting MP. But I felt that often they would be in the papers a lot, but people wouldn't necessarily particularly remember their names. I'm not sure the MPs appearing occasionally in the papers.
It's amazing how quickly MPs get forgotten as well. That's where you do need to kind of reinvent and do different things. I've noticed a lot of MPs who just, I'm not going to say it because it's embarrassing, but I saw recently a member of our cabinet walking down the road. I was sitting watching them in a cafe, and I walked, and literally nobody batted an eyelid. And not that long ago, they were quite a senior cabinet minister.
Question from Sally Davis, maybe to end. I don't know whether this is Dame Sally Davis, the great person who used to be the public health chief of England.
It could be.
Predecessor of Chris Whitty. She says, I used to despise ironing. I now listen to the Restless Politics podcast while ironing. So I now look actively forward to it, to the point that I even iron sheets so I can listen for longer. What examples do Rory and Alastair have of positive associations? Initially, I thought she meant iron sheets in the sense of wriggly tin on a roof.
No, she means on an ironing board.
Yeah,
an ironing board, as you seem to think she calls it. Associations. I'll tell you, when I ran the marathon in 2003, I don't know why this popped in my head when you asked the question. By the way, I don't think that is Sally Davis. I think if she'd asked, I think Dame Sally Davis, she might ask that. I don't know. If it is Dame Sally Davis, ex of National Health Service, please let us know. And if it's not, please let us know a little bit more about your life, other than your ironing. But when I crossed the line, this shows you how marketing stuff works. Somebody put a bottle of Lucozade into my hand.
Very smart.
And now, whenever I finish
a thing. You want one of those.
I want a drink a Lucozade.
I wonder whether it's stuck in people's heads with sheets. Maybe that's the thing.
I think the other thing I do is I never. I don't know if this is the same thing, but I once put my left shoe on before my right shoe.
Yeah.
And later that day, I fell down the stairs.
And now you never do it again.
So since then, I will always put my right shoe on first.
You can see that with footballers' country. You can see that with Harry Kane taking the penalty, that there were obviously some rituals to do with his socks and stuff. I think they get these very, very big. And then, of course, the other thing I picked up, which must be your life all the time, is the sense to which you as a viewer, in my case, sitting in Emma and Jordan watching him on the screen, I begin to worry that something I'm doing in the room when I'm watching the screen is going to affect his ability to get it into the goal.
All the time.
Which is quite mad, because it's like umpteen million people watching.
No, it's totally insane. However, I'll tell you where I think it happens. So, like, here's one. Right, let's say you might have gone to the game.
Yeah.
Okay? So when they announced the crowd, right, and they said, tonight's attendance is 61,413. Yeah. If you'd have gone, it would have been 61,414.
Yeah.
And one of the players might have reacted slightly differently on that piece of information to had it been one fewer. That's the kind of inactive butterfly effect. Look, I'll tell you the other thing. At Queen's Park Rangers on Sunday when Burnley, because real football was back at the weekend, Rory, Burnley away at Queen's Park Rangers. And I actually went with Charles Kennedy's son, Donald, who, unlike Charles, is quite a football fan. And I said to him, just before we scored our second goal, I said, I think if I put my gloves on, something might happen. Gloves went on, we scored.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. Right, Rory, I've got to tell you, and this is from Carl C., but your 6-word description of why you're still a Conservative went down
very badly.
If I can make 5 words, like a bag of sick.
Yeah.
So you included tradition. Now, I was a bit pissed off with that and the one that really pissed me off was landscape.
Yeah.
I've loved landscape all my life. So why do you think Tories have a hold on this? And so he says, could you give some examples of British traditions you are particularly attached to and that you worry will be under threat when, says Carl, I think we know his political colours, when the Conservatives leave office?
It's a really sensitive thing and it's a difficult thing. But if I think about why I became a Conservative rather than Labour, and I remember being teased by Tristram Hunt about it, it was a Labour MP. Basically, instinctively, my whole life, I grew up in a very different way, revering lots of bits of British history. I revered the monarchy, revered the British Army, huge admiration for British history. And definitely, if I looked across the Labour benches and talked about the kind of books I read, the kind of films I watched, going with my father to Remembrance Day parades as a little 8-year-old, standing there with my little red poppy on, saluting. This wasn't the life of most of the Labour MPs across the aisle. And the things that I cared about, many of my Tory MPs deeply romantic about British regiments, for example, about the abolition of the Black Watch. I didn't know any Labour MP who was deeply motivated by the question of whether or not the Black Watch was watched. Now, you might be a bit different. You had a brother in the Scots Guards, but it's the same. I just sort of feel that my emotional reaction to those things, like the monarchy, is different from the kind of emotional reaction.
No, but the question Carl's asking is which of those traditions would go if the Conservatives weren't there?
Well,
I think Labour are very committed to the military. Funny enough, I don't know why, when you were speaking, Neil Kinnock popped into my head. And I can see Neil absolutely making speeches about that stuff.
Yeah, I think he was very much, I mean, he instinctively...
There's a very strong working class, patriotic...
Yeah, but equally, that's obviously not the tradition of Jeremy Corbyn. Very much not. I mean, he definitely would not feel emotionally in the way that I do when I walk in the Remembrance Day parade.
But as Mick Lynch reminded us on the radio this morning, Jeremy Corbyn's not the Prime Minister.
No, he's definitely not the Prime Minister. So I think Conservative, I mean, the clue is in the name that really we're about conserving things. And I think Labour has tended to...
But do you still feel like you're a Tory? Do you still feel Tory?
Well, I don't like this government, but I'm still on the old-fashioned, traditional conserving side of things. So when I talk about landscape, I'm talking about protecting and conserving what I love in the Cumbrian landscape. And this is where I disagree with people like Michael Gove. Michael Gove's, he's in the Conservative Party, but he's a radical. He's a radical Whiggish liberal.
So here's one then. Chris Colpin, Rory lists landscape as one of the reasons he's a Tory. I don't understand this. I love and understand the marvellous British landscape, but it doesn't come near to making me a Tory. Rather the reverse, because restrictive land ownership and capitalist farming have done so much damage to our landscapes.
Well, that's again where I probably disagree. So the Cumbrian landscape that I love.
What about land ownership, though? Come on.
Well, it's partly about land ownership. I love actually the patchwork of family-owned farms right the way across Cumbria. I love the combination of sheep pasture with wilderness, and I'm very, very suspicious, and I've gotten lots of trouble with this. In fact, someone's just written a book who was the RSPB attacking me for this, with the rewilding movement, both on the right and on the left, and their attempt to transform the landscape into something it hasn't looked like for 2,500 years.
Mm. I remember my cousin giving me a book, Who Owns Scotland, a few years ago. I don't know if you read it.
Yeah, I've got a copy of it.
I bet you have. You in it?
It's all my neighbours.
Is your family in it? Yeah, I mean, it's just like it's a very, very, very small number of very, 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 very wealthy people. Last one.
Okay, last one. Part of the problem, this is George Clare, part of the problem in British politics is that the Prime Minister and Principal Secretaries of State must balance their work as government ministers with their work as MPs representing a geographical constituency. If we were to transition to a party list system, the PM could focus on the departments and delegate their parliamentary responsibilities and constituency matters to the next candidate duly elected on the list. The system already operates in successful democracies such as Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. Would this work for the UK?
Similar question. Ols, been watching TV show Borgen recently, Danish political drama. Do you think the UK would benefit from a multi-party system which no one party can hold absolute power? Similar area. I don't buy the idea that just because you're a minister you can't be an MP. I mean, yes, it adds to the workload, but at the same time, I think it's a really, really important point of connection. And you have to be good at delegating and good at building systems and making sure you've got people keeping everything tracked for you. So I guess deep down, that's a question from somebody who wants to change the electoral system.
Well, I think it's also deep down from something that I felt with my constituents, which is they couldn't understand how you could have a full-time job as a constituency MP and then suddenly become a cabinet minister working full-time on running the health service. How could you have two full-time jobs? And the answer had to be that one or the other was going to have to suffer. You can't do everything.
I think we should close with this one. John Thompson. Now, we can give this is a really complicated question, but I think we should give a one-sentence answer to it. You can only choose one of the following. Which is it and why? Burnley gain promotion until 2030, which means they win the triple. Global extreme poverty eradicated. Carbon emissions at net zero or slightly negative. Global female education levels, the same as male. All populist charlatans are brought to justice.
I'd go for Burnley.
You're lying. You're lying. Okay. Let's leave it at that then.